Hello, my name is Robert Daniel. I've been a private sector educator for over 20 years in many alternative environments, and I'm looking forward to starting a brand new learning program because one is badly needed. Traditional education is broken. The methods which are taught to teachers and which they use in traditional schools don't align with the way that human beings actually learn. Well, we do have theories out there, such as Montessori and democratic education, which reflect how kids actually learn. And the curriculum, as we all know, is full of political agendas. It always has been. But within the last couple of years in particular, it has been more toxic and pushed more heavily than it ever has been. I know that a lot of parents want to withdraw their children from the government-run schools, and I want to help you do that. It won't be as hard as you think, but you need professional assistance, and that's what I'd like to do. In this video, I want to give you a brief self-introduction. You can find a longer self-introduction about my background and where I've taught and what I believe on my website, daniellearningservices.com. I invite you to go there and send me comments and questions through the website and read my extended self-introduction. After self-introduction, I want to talk about several general problems that we face when we want to take our children out of the government-run schools. In particular, time, funding, and knowledge. And I want to propose creative solutions to those problems. And finally, I want to end with describing what my learning program will look like. But of course, I'm open to constructing one with you according to your wants, needs, and values. So I've been a private sector educator, as I mentioned, for over 20 years. I'm currently also a doctoral student in educational leadership with a Montessori focus, and I hope to graduate in 2025. I have other degrees, including a Master of Arts in Education, and degrees from high-level universities like Toronto and Boston in social sciences. I'm also certified as a Montessori instructor at the adolescent level. I'm the founder and owner of a small business venture called Daniel Learning Services. Here, as briefly as I can, is my philosophy of education and what I believe education is about. I believe that the main purpose of education is to help young people acquire the skills and knowledge that they need to live a fulfilling and successful life as a responsible individual in a free society. Those aren't the goals of traditional education today. But that's what I believe education is about. My philosophy of education, as briefly as I can state it, is this. First of all, since all human beings are unique individuals, that's a fact. It's also a fact about all young people. All students are unique. All students have their own interests, goals, and preferences. They have their own strengths and weaknesses in different skills and subject areas. They have learning differences. Many of them are disabled. All students are uniquely different. So education needs to respect and reflect that fact. Education should be individualized, at will as much as possible, and the student should be in the driver's seat, with the minimum necessary adult guidance, of course. Secondly, I think the curriculum and the purpose of education is to develop the human mind. So the curriculum should be structured that way, and it should contain meaningful content. By meaningful, I mean content which is useful for living a human life, and which is not laden with political agendas. But it should also be about developing the mind. Personally, I think that the pillars of philosophy and philosophical reasoning and critical thinking courses should be the core subjects in any curriculum, in lieu of math and language. Math and language are, of course, very important, but I think the core subjects, the basis of thinking and learning, should be philosophical reasoning. That's my opinion. I believe that education should, particularly in the social sciences, should be about showing students the variety of competing alternative points of view on a subject from credible sources and discussing them, and giving the students the critical reasoning skills that they need to sort it out for themselves and draw their own conclusions by the time they become adults. We don't own human beings. Education should not be about developing human beings or shaping young human beings the way that somebody else thinks is right. Young people are self-autonomous individuals. When they become adults, they should be a tabula rasa. They have the right to decide for themselves what is right and wrong morally, what they believe the truth is, and our job as educators is to help them do that, not to structure them into something that somebody else thinks is good. Having said that, I'm a strong proponent of parental rights and parental sovereignty over their children. I am a strong advocate, for example, of parental rights legislation. When I build a learning program, it will be individualized, with parents having a heavy hand in deciding what is taught and how. Now, what are the problems that we face when pulling our children out of the public school system or otherwise putting them in a private setting? Time, funding, and knowledge. And I want to start off by addressing funding first. Many people believe that it would be too expensive to pull their children out of the government-run schools and put them in a private setting. But that is in part because parents aren't aware of all the funding that are options that are available. And one of the most important ones, if not the most important one for parents in New Hampshire, is education freedom accounts. So I want to talk about education freedom accounts first, as well as other funding methods, and how we can make a learning program in the private sector cost efficient. What are education freedom accounts? You should all know about this. Anyone who has a child in New Hampshire should know what an education freedom account is. A year ago, the legislature passed education freedom accounts after a long fight. And what this entitles parents to do is this. If you are the parent of a child and your family income, school-age child, and your family income is less than 300% of the federal poverty line, which is a fairly high benchmark, you are entitled to divert the state portion of your education taxes to private resources of your choice. Now this amounts to, last time I checked, about $4,800 per child per year for families that are living below 300% of the federal poverty line. So $4,800 per child per year. It's a lot of money, which is available to you to spend on approved private sector resources. And the list of approved resources is quite broad. When we construct a learning program of our own, we can register it as an approved resource quite easily. You can spend it on tuition for private schools, on tutoring. Homeschoolers get to spend that money on any homeschooling resources they need, within reason. I encourage you all to go to the Children's Scholarship Fund website. They administer the education freedom accounts. Go to Children's Scholarship Fund of New Hampshire, and on their website, look up the page on education freedom accounts, and please inform yourself about education freedom accounts and inform all the parents that you know in New Hampshire about this phenomenon. And support politicians in the 24 election that support education freedom accounts, because the Democrats are working as hard as they can to gut it and to delegislate it. But this will be one of the primary sources of funding that I will look to when I help you create a learning program. Now another one is grants. And the most significant grant for education startups in the private sector is the VELA grants. VELA Corporation gives approximately $30 million as of last year, per year, of grants to private sector education startups and existing schools. And they are very friendly towards people with a free market orientation, businesses with a free market orientation. They have 3 tiers of grants, a $10,000 tier, a $50,000 tier, and even a tier at $250,000. They only fund existing programs, but as soon as we launch a program of our own, we should at least be able to avail ourselves of the $10,000 VELA grant, if not the $50,000 one. And of course, there's crowdfunding. We should do crowdfunding, and I'm willing, ready, and able to help you launch a good crowdfunding campaign. Now, in addition to bringing in funds, we need to keep the education program that we run cost efficient, and that's easily done. So one thing we can do to keep costs down is avail ourselves of lightly guided methods of learning. I'll call it that. Like asynchronous online learning or at-will learning at a site, which has the minimum amount of supervision necessary. That precludes us having to hire as many full-time teachers at a high salary as we otherwise would have. Another thing I propose is this. Why not hire some of the parents in the community as part-time teachers? If some parents would like to get trained as teachers, and in the philosophy of their choice, for example, I'm a Montessorian, and I'd love to tell you all about the Montessori method, because most people don't know, and it's an excellent natural style of learning. But perhaps a parent would like to get trained in the democratic method of education or something else. We would be creating our own cadre of teachers for the private sector for our community. We would be putting money in the pockets of stay-at-home parents who will work as assistant teachers while assisting their own children learn on site. These assistant teachers from among the community would be helping the full-time teachers that we hire, and so lowering their workload, and we wouldn't have to hire as many full-time teachers that way. It's a win for the parents. They get an income. I propose to subsidize their teacher training. It's a win for the students to have their own parents involved. And it's a win for the community because we will be creating our own cadre of teachers who are like-minded, who share our values, and who learn teaching methods which are natural to children and respectful of children in the way they individually learn. Going forward, these would be full-time, seasoned teachers and the start of a new teaching community. Knowledge. Now, as I mentioned, we do need teachers in an education program to a degree because teachers are experts in their field. We don't need teachers who are trained in the mainstream methods, particularly those used in the government-run system right now, or teachers who push political agendas. So we will hire one or two carefully, and I of course put myself forward as a senior teacher. Which brings us to the final portion of my video. What would education look like under Daniel Learning Services stewardship at a site? Well, it would be site-based, but I would like there to be a large online component as well. I suggest having a portion of the education be done through asynchronous online courses that we construct together, or good ones that we find on the market, because, again, this will keep the costs of staff down. But I envision most learning being on-site, and as a Montessorian, I know how to set up an excellent learning environment that will be very engaging and yet well-structured, where students can come to the site at will, learn at will, with a bit of guidance. I do believe every student should have an individualized learning program, which they construct with guidance of the Adult Guide to Education, and which is a work in progress always, so that the students can adjust it when they find a new interest or are pulled in a certain direction. Adult and student can readjust the learning plan and every week check in to see what was accomplished and what the student needs help with, and shape the path every week going forward. I don't believe in grading. Grading stigmatizes, and letter grades tell you nothing objective. I do believe we need a bit of progress tracking, so I suggest progress tracking that looks like this. A list of learning objectives, and for each very precisely worded objective, has the student begun learning it yet? Is the student learning it in progress? Or has the student mastered it? That's all. Emerging, in progress, mastered. No stigma. Learning with me is fun. I've done everything from teaching history using Dungeons and Dragons to teaching more serious courses for older adolescents and young adults in critical reasoning skills. I'm primarily a social studies teacher. I have taught at the community college system. I've taught high school and middle school as well, social studies, and I've also taught math up to and including middle school. So in conclusion, I want to help you build an excellent learning program that is a hybrid of online and site-based to help keep costs down and give students a variety of learning. I want to bear the brunt of the workload so that parents don't have to. I'd like to hire a parent or two as teachers in training and assistant teachers, staff. And I'd like to help with the funding because there are many resources out there. We can do this. What I need is a site. I need to know what you want and what you want education to look like. And I need students. I look forward to helping you do this. And the last thing I would like you to do is to go to my website, daniellearningservices.com, D-A-N-I-E-L, learningservices.com. You can read my extended self-introduction there, and you can send some questions through the contact widget there. I'd love to see your questions, and I look forward to working with you all in person.